Have you ever had a moment where you wake up one day and it feels like your eyes finally open for the first time and you look back at your life and you ask, what have I been doing these last few years? Where you realize that maybe instead of living life on your own terms, doing things the way that would make sense to actually do them, it dawns on you that life has been happening to you instead of the other way around. Maybe you see other people in your life, or you start seeing content online. Let's say use YouTube as the example here, where the creator's working hard to create a life of, let's use financial freedom as the example here. And then you get that creeping feeling of, wait a minute, I'm in the prime time of my life to do the same exact thing, to take the same exact steps, to reach the same exact accomplishments, but I haven't been. That's really not a great feeling. But feelings like that are the fastest way to spur true motivation within yourself to start making that change. And so in today's video, I want to talk about finding the plot, as I've dubbed it, and what that looks like. So first, let's define what I mean when I say find the plot. Finding the plot is when you start pulling your life together. Right? You start getting rid of the sinful vices that keep you down, then start making those incremental steps toward improving your own situation. These don't have to be, broad brush, oh, I've won the lottery, or, oh, I got some, insurance payout or whatever. The small daily, day by day incremental steps that over time will build into a better situation than where you are now, or a better just standard, a better place, better whatever than where you are right now. Right? And with that, there's 2 bullet points. And this is bullet point number 1 is you've got to put down the vices. This could be alcohol, it could be weed, it could be, addiction of any kind, of any form. It's these things that they only provide that hit of dopamine, that next high, that next thing, that next sensation for you to chase, rather than anything of actual value or importance, right, in the actual grand scheme of life. Because addiction will destroy your life, addiction of any kind. And it's insidious in that it can fly under the radar for years at a time. Right, is no alcoholic ever thinks that they will become one when they have that first sip, nor does the weed addict know the impact that prolonged use will have on their brain and cognitive function later on in life as they continue to use. And so in hearing that, you might think, were it so easy to actually just accomplish and do that. And I understand that saying that is much easier than doing it. In my own life, I've dealt with addiction, and that thing followed me around like white on rice for years before it finally started to break. So I understand firsthand just how insidious addiction can be. But that's the critical step number 1, is you got to put down the vice. And now step 1.5, if you will, is after you put down the vice, you got to find something good to replace it with. Maybe you've heard the saying that idle hands are the devil's instruments. And in my own life, that's definitely been true. And if you've ever been idle for any prolonged period of time and just not really doing anything, maybe just watching Netflix or just scrolling on YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it is, you probably know how quickly your brain will start to wander toward things that it shouldn't be wandering towards. So what is this good thing to replace the vice with? Well, it could be a lot of different things. It could be extra prayer time talking to God, or it could be reading a book. It could be playing a video game. It could be going to the gym. It could be any number of things that give some kind of better by comparison outcome to whatever that addiction is, whatever that pain point is in your own life. That's holding you back and keeping you from achieving what you want to achieve. The point isn't necessarily any one particular thing, only that it is a good and productive alternative that replaces the vice that just sucks the life just clean up out of you. And this leads into bullet point number 2, is that once that is done, once that is in place, this is the point where you start taking those incremental steps to improve your life. And think long term on this. This is 5 years, 10 years, even 15 years down the road. You ask yourself, where do I want to be when I'm 40 or 30 or however old, right? And Lao Tzu had an old saying from ancient China, and it still holds water today. He said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And it's true, right? It is much easier for us to take one small step at a time than it is to envision some grand journey and every little thing that could go right or wrong during that time. Right? If you spend time thinking too far ahead of your own present situation and your own present, let's say, problems that you're trying to solve for, you risk introducing decision paralysis because of something called the butterfly effect, which in essence, the butterfly effect describes how one small change can result in much larger and more impactful changes later. Right? Some just historical examples. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, in the lead up to World War I, his death was, on that day, in that moment, the direct result of his driver taking a wrong turn in the city, placing him in harm's way and ultimately sparking the outbreak of the conflict. And in World War II, Nagasaki wasn't the original target for the second atomic bomb in World War II, but poor weather conditions threw the American B-29s off course, which ultimately led them to the city of Nagasaki. Right? And so letting the fourth order or 10th or 20th order conditions occupy your attention while you haven't made the first or second incremental decision in the overall process isn't going to do you any good, or will just generally just slow you down, right? It's in my own life professionally, I work in corporate finance, and when I'm trying to build a financial model, if I sit here and try to fixate on what I want the final outputs of the model to look like, and I try to envision all of the inputs and all of the ways I'm going to calculate, whatever it is I'm trying to calculate. If I try to do all of this thinking all at once, it's going to make my head hurt, and I'm going to wind up shutting down after about 20 minutes of trying that because I'm trying to consider too much information, right? It's information overload at its finest, right? And even further, more broadly, just into my personal life, I've had this, what am I doing kind of moment, really recently, not even all that long ago. And I've set my own personal sights on two distinct goals that said, all right, what do these incremental steps look like for me? Well, one of them is starting this YouTube channel and just start making content. I've done YouTube before and didn't really, take off or anything. And, there came a point where I just really couldn't do it anymore, or even at that point didn't want to really do it anymore. But it's a creative outlet. It's a place for me to just put my thoughts down on paper and just put them out there and hope that, they're helpful to somebody else, and that I'm not the only one who's thinking about these things or dealing with these things out there. And then so that's point number one. And then point number two for me is I'm starting to build my investment portfolio again after having experienced just some financial hardship over the last couple of years. I wanted to have some things, plural, that I could pour my own creativity into that wasn't just playing video games. And this is a fun hobby, don't get me wrong. Of course, I've played games for years and years, ever since I was a kid, and I'm probably going to continue playing games well later into my own life. But I also want to establish myself financially in my young age so that I'm not restricted to working a conventional job my entire life, right? Achieving that level of financial freedom where I'd work a job because maybe I want to do it, or I find the work enjoyable or rewarding or whatever else, but I'm not stuck in the rat race, so to speak, not stuck in this paycheck to paycheck cycle, or anything like that. And both of these things are just starting out for me. I don't expect to see any major returns anytime soon, but the important thing is just you start, right? You take that first incremental step, that first small step, and that's so much more than a lot of people that you'll meet in life will actually just do themselves. Like, you would be stunned at how much further into the game you might be if you just take that first step and just start, right? And so let's kind of bring it all together, right? If you're feeling stuck, like life is just kind of happening to you or happening around you, hence the name of the video, you've probably lost the plot somewhere along the way, like how I did. For years and years, I just carried on through life, went through the motions, and was just trying to make it one more day, make it to one more thing, solve just one more problem 5 minutes in front of my face, but wasn't ever thinking beyond that, well into the future of the next 5, 10, 15 years of where do I want to be at that point in my own life. But now if I can start and take that first step myself, you can too, right? If I lost the plot and I'm trying to find it right now, if you've lost the plot, you can find it and get it back, right? And the two things here that help me regain my own focus and my own attention, it's breaking the addiction, breaking the vice, putting down that thing that is just a waste of time. And maybe you probably know that it's not a productive thing to do, or you know that it's a waste of time, but for whatever reason, you just keep going back to it. And that's a hard thing to do. I know. I've been there. I know plenty of people at my church and neighbors and elsewhere that have been there themselves and have dealt with the same kind of vices themselves. It's not an easy thing to do, but you can do it. And so that's step one. And then step two is taking those small incremental steps to improve my own life 10 years down the road, right? Because if you're anything like me, if I, like my example about financial modeling just a second ago, if I try to think on too much of a big picture all at once, all it's going to do is just overload my brain and I'm going to shut down. I'm not going to be thinking very clearly at all. I'm not going to be any good to anybody, right? But this is all just me. I'm just some guy from the American South, right? And if I can take these first steps, you can too. Right? Set your mind to whatever your targets and goals are. Identify, what is the first or second step that you need to do to move in that direction, and then you start executing on it. And I don't mean, big grandiose objectives. I mean, if you want to, improve your own financial situation, well, maybe that starts with, well, let's get rid of the credit card debt. I'm just using that as, a very easy example here, right? But just find some low-hanging fruit that is approachable, that you can grab hold of and you can start working towards and start working down. You do that and you will be amazed at how far and how quickly you can go when you just take the chance and try. Like in my own life, using credit card debt as an example, just earlier this year, I was over $10,000 in credit card debt. And now midway through the year, that debt is gone. It's down to zero. And I've completely gotten rid of it because I saw it and I said, you know what? I don't want to have this anymore. So I hustled, I grinded, I kept at it at my job and, lived as frugally as I could and got rid of it. And that was that kind of low hanging fruit. It's step one for me in that process of reaching towards financial freedom. So that's just some examples just from my own personal life. Take this and apply it to your own life and however it fits for you, because everyone's situation is different. No two solutions are going to be exactly the same. I'm just hoping just to give a couple of ideas of here's what's worked for me, and hopefully that sparks some thoughts inside of your own head for you in your life. But now that's all I've got for this video. I hope that this helps in thinking about your own life goals and kind of how you want to start, achieving them. Right. I'm hardly the only one to think about these things, and I certainly am not going to be the last one to ever do it. So, just part of just what I want to do this YouTube channel for is just take thoughts like this and just put them out there so that, if I can spend my time and create something and put something out there for someone else to watch, hopefully it's helpful. Hopefully it just, maybe it doesn't solve the problem, but it gets you thinking about the problem that you then turn around and solve yourself. And that's enough for me. Like that's I guess if I had a goal for this channel right now, that would be the goal, is just take some of the things that I've, learned over the years and just try to help somebody avoid the same kind of mistakes that I've made in my own life. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.